Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me cosplayer Parmesan, who has cosplayed as Starlight, Lois Lane, Extractador, or Exact. I'm probably going to mess it up. I probably already have, and I'm probably going to be corrected at some point. Or
Eradicator.
Eradicator, I think it's pronounced. Black Canary, and as Ravager Rose Wilson, to name a few. So, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, I am very excited because I like a bunch of the stuff you've done in cosplay. I'm going to talk about some of the stuff I mentioned and a bunch of other cosplays, but I am curious before we dive into them, how did you get into cosplay?
I when I got into cosplay, I don't think it was called cosplay, at least not in this country. I think it was called taking Halloween way too seriously. Starting on Halloween costumes in August. But I mean, I guess what me to it is the same thing that drew me to comics. I love superheroes, and I like feeling strapped and zipped and clipped and ready to go. It makes you feel powerful when you put the cape on and the boots and the gloves, and so yeah.
And so obviously something drew you to cosplay. Obviously Halloween happened, and then obviously you sort of caught the cosplay bug. So
Yeah.
what was your first cosplay that was, I guess, not a closet cosplay or not Halloween, but actually the steps of getting into cosplay?
The first costume I guess I ever put together would be Julie Newmar's Catwoman. And it was the first thing I created not for Halloween. I believe it was still like a costume party, so I'm not sure if the cosplay community would agree that that was my first cosplay, but that was the first thing I put together. And then it was Regina's Evil Queen from Once Upon a Time, which I don't have a lot of pictures of. This was pre-Instagram days.
And so, what was that entire process like? Because I definitely want to talk about the creation process and the inside stuff of cosplay and putting it together. So, putting both of these cosplays together, what was that like for you? Because
Um,
obviously, going the first time is always the hardest.
Well, actually, they couldn't be more different because Julie Newmar's Catwoman was a black leotard with a gold necklace and a pair of ears, and you do the hair just right, and it looks just like her, and you got the belt and the boots. There's not a whole lot going on. You know, most of it was store bought. I didn't make or sew back then any of that costume. And so when I went from that costume to the Evil Queen, I decided to make a dress out of another dress, and I had never sewed or deconstructed a garment or reconstructed a garment. And it was the first time I had used a sewing machine and notions, and that I think that's what really gave me the cosplay bug, because I love to learn. I love to do new stuff. Like I'm a nerd. I'm a sponge. Whatever there is to be learned, I want to learn it. So all of a sudden, I was learning how to sew, and it kept pushing me creatively to learn all these different new things, all these different mediums and stuff. That was hard. My dress actually broke the night that it was supposed to. I was supposed to wear it for the first time, but I rocked it anyway. So.
So to even go off of that, and we're going to dive into that in 1 second, but I am curious because obviously I mentioned a bunch of your cosplays already. And where does the inspiration for you come from? Because obviously, I'm a big anime fan, I'm a big comic book fan, and I don't cosplay per se, but I see a lot of cosplays and I see a lot of different ideas. And so, where do your ideas come from and the inspirations come from, and what influences you to say, hey, I want to do this cosplay versus this other cosplay, or I want to do this one first versus this other one second?
Well, it used to be about budget and what I had in my house. As I grew up, I was able to, afford the finer aspects of cosplay. But um, what makes you want to do one versus another one, I think, is how much I relate to the character. I don't cosplay characters that I don't relate to. Um, there's only one time I ever got into a cosplay, and I was not really about the costume. I loved the character. It was not about the costume. The costume, poofy skirt. This is actually the first Starlight. I was very reluctant to cosplay that one because it was very pretty and pageanty, and that wasn't really what I associated with a superhero. But I did relate to her story. I think a lot of women related to her story, and I loved the care that they took with that character. So when my husband bought a Homelander, I opened the box and there was a Starlight, and I was like, I guess we're doing this. And everyone at Comic-Con really liked it. So when season 2 came out, I was like, we're doing this. We're doing season 2 also. And she actually turned out to be one of my favorite characters that I've ever cosplayed. So, but yeah, I have to relate to them. I have to want to be in their clothes, you know, because it's not just a costume. It's that role play. It's you let a little something out in yourself that you don't every single day.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to get into that when
Yeah.
we talk about Starlight and all that fun stuff and the boys. But even going further into this, because I like to talk inside baseball. So what does your creative process look like when you find a character you want to cosplay, and then you have to go figure out how to build it? So do you use references? Do you do sketches? Do you just piece it together and then make certain aspects of it and then use other store-bought items? Or how does that entire process work for you?
Um, I mean, I think there's always at least a store-bought item. Like for instance, I didn't sew this black, suit together. But I would consider that like a homemade cosplay as opposed to the Starlights, which were bought from Sim Cosplay. And so I guess my process starts with finding every single image that Google or Pinterest has on the character. Um, Maybe obsessing over it for about a month, and then deciding which version I want to do, or what aspects of all of their costumes I want to like kind of make into my own, kind of like I did with Black Canary. Um, and then there's drawings, lots of drawings, and then material selection. Again, budget usually has a lot to do with that. And
So let's talk about budget, because one of the things that people I think don't understand about cosplay is that cosplay gets very expensive very quickly. It can become very expensive very quickly. Materials aren't cheap. I'm going to take a leap of faith and say you're in the U.S., right?
I'm I'm what?
You're in the United States,
Oh,
correct?
yes, I am. I'm Brooklyn.
The reason why I asked this is because I was speaking to people in the UK about 3 months ago in Australia, and one of the things that they had a hard time is finding certain materials and certain fabrics, and there was big backups, and EVA foam was a big issue. And so it's not even an issue of price per se, but it's an issue. Price obviously is affected when there's very, very low supply, but it's this idea of even finding things. So how do you go about balancing a budget, because things can get very expensive
Yep.
even if you can find them?
Yeah. I mean, it's a give and take. You know, if it's a project that involves a lot of foam, maybe you get the cheaper cape. But yeah, it's kind of like it's a balancing act. Which part of this costume needs, for instance, I'm making one of Yennefer's dresses from The Witcher, and it has a big caged sleeve. And there's only one person I know that sells this ribbon on Etsy. So when she's out of it, I've got to wait. And I started making it, I think, when season 1 came out. So sometimes there's only one material that you want to work with. And then you just have to wait for when that can get here. Amazon doesn't have everything. Usually it's a mixture between Etsy and Amazon and sometimes eBay. But yeah.
And then obviously even going further off of that, because one of the things also is that since you buy certain components of it and then piece components together and then modify components, one of the things, and I've speak to other people who do mixtures where they build things from scratch and they also buy things sometimes depending on the cosplay, which I think is actually smart because it's more of a finding a who versus a how,
Mm-hmm.
where I think that that's how I run certain things, where I find people to do things that I don't want to do
Right.
and are better at it versus me doing something all by myself. And so when you're building a cosplay that you're buying a bodysuit or you're with your, Lois Lane cosplay that we're going to talk about, you bought that entire suit. How do you go about making sure it fits? Because that's a whole different ball game when you're piecing things together, and it is an art to understand, what fits, how to modify something if it doesn't fit. Sometimes you might want to go bigger just in case, and so it's a whole different ball game, and it's an art in many ways.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, I'm lucky that I fit into most of my sizes. I don't have to like do too much worrying about the way it comes. And we also live near a really good tailor. I mean, one of the other things that I really love about the cosplay community is that we will use any excuse to prop somebody else up. So if there's a tailor we've been working with, you'll always find, we've credited her in a post. Or the artist that I work with a lot, Aubrey Stalker Marino, I love to use her because if I draw something, nobody cares, but she's an actual artist and I would love for you guys to look at more of her work. So I'm definitely gonna, prop up and help the rest of my community grow as well. So I don't have to do everything myself. All of my ideas haven't even come from me. So yeah, it's the community a lot more than just what's trending on Instagram in cosplay community. It helps you grow, and other people in the community can completely change a project or inspire a project or help you get the paint on your armor right, for instance.
Yeah, it could be a lot of fun. There could be very helpful things in the cosplay community, and there could also be things that are not so helpful. And there's also a bunch of ideas that just get thrown out there. And I've seen a bunch of people, last Tuesday somebody was on who did a really cool concept that I'm expecting to be emulated. He has a gender bend of Laura Croft and a gender bend of Jill Valentine.
Oh,
And
awesome.
he does the male version of it. So he's a guy who does the male version, what Laura Croft would look like as a guy, or what
That's
Joe Valentine would look like as a guy. And I said to him, he needs to find a girl who would do Chris Redfield as a girl, and it would be perfect. But I'm expecting him to be emulated, and I publicly said it. He knows that I'm expecting it, and it's going to be amazing when somebody does it. So there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown out there, but I want to get out of inside baseball and start talking about some of your cosplays. And you've gone both Marvel and DC.
yes.
And I definitely want to talk about Marvel first because you've done Black Widow. And
Mhm.
obviously, I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that movie, if it's coming out in theaters or if it's going on Disney Plus. I'm confused. I'm sure a lot of other people are confused too. Obviously, it got delayed a year, and it's kind of a prequel movie. But you've done two versions of her, and so you've done, I guess, the blonde version of her, which is a little bit later,
Yep.
technically, from the movie universe. And so, where did that one come from, and what prompted that? And it's a little bit more, I guess, militant, if you will, and
Yeah.
some other cool stuff going on with it.
Yeah, the first widow I ever did was kind of like a more tactical version of her traditional comic book character with like the red curly hair. But when I started going out a little bit more in the cosplay community, the first one they were introduced to was the blonde one, and it was just a really powerful look because I had never seen her portrayed with blonde hair before. I think the quote about having wiping the red in her ledger, and that being associated with why her hair was white was awesome. Um, yeah, it was it was the right time for that costume too. I think the movie had just come out.
Yeah, there's some other cool stuff with this. Obviously, it kind of gives off an X-Men vibe to it in many ways. And also the widow bites are gold, and so those are cool on how those are built.
The white-haired widow bites are black, but the
Oh, maybe I looked at it the wrong way. My bad. So
that's okay.
obviously though, they are pretty cool on how they're built.
Yep.
And even what was that like? Because prop building is an entirely different segment
Yes.
from
Yes.
traditional cosplay.
Yes. This here is a 3D printer. This was one of the biggest changes I made. I would have made any bites out of foam before I got this thing, but it looks better. It's plasticky. I don't have to sit there and like cut foam, which is really hard on the hands. But so is sanding and priming and painting and all that stuff. A lot of the props that you'll see in all of my widows were actually made by my husband, Ready Season 1. He's the 3D printing genius in the house. I got it for him.
So what is that like with cosplay? Because 3D printing is a whole new segment. Obviously, 3D printing can be used for everything. There are houses being made out of 3D printers with
Yeah.
cement in China. It's the coolest thing. If anybody hasn't seen that, it's awesome what they're building and what you can do with it. There's edible stuff that also, like cookies, are
Yep.
being made out of 3D printers also, which is
Yep.
awesome. No, they're not plastic before anybody asks. But even this idea, because 3D printing with cosplay is newer, and maybe they'll last 3-4 years. And obviously, props are being built out of that, and you could make a very realistic prop.
Yep.
And a variety of other stuff is being built out of 3D printing. And so, what is that like to now have that in play? Because it does expand what can be done.
Um, I guess because the concept of the cosplay always comes first. Whether we had the 3D printer or we had a lot of foam, wouldn't really change the project that is being done. But it definitely changes how it. I mean,
Did you also feel that it allows for things to be done in-house more versus having to go out of house? And
yeah,
also, I don't know the expenditure of a 3D printer per se, but I would imagine that it's not all that much more expensive, or it might be a little bit more expensive, but you also have a lot more control over it, and that you have more precision, and that there's more accuracy. And if the cost is $10 more, but you're 100% more accurate, I mean, it's kind of weighing the pros and cons a little bit.
yeah. I think it's definitely cheaper than buying from Etsy, for instance, like buying a helmet or a mask that you could make here. It does turn out to be cheaper. It does save you money. I wouldn't necessarily say time, because now instead of someone else making it and shipping it to you in 2-3 days, it's going to take 2-3 days to print, and then you're going to be sanding it for a day or two, depending on the size of it, and then you're responsible for getting the paint job right, for instance. So if it's a metal paint job that you're going for, it might be harder. So yeah, but ultimately, I would have to say that it does expand what you think about. Little tiny pieces in your cosplay become just better detailed. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You could add more detail because you're 3D printing it. And obviously, if you program a 3D printer, or you have the right software and then you have the right file, it's going to print exactly like that, unless there's something wrong with your 3D printer. And then if that's the case, then it's your 3D printer's fault.
Yes, and if you don't feel like constantly fixing a 3D printer, you probably shouldn't get one, because there's a lot of modifications you're going to want to make, and then there's a lot of mistakes that you're going to make, and then sometimes it jams, and sometimes your house is too cold, and so it is a learning process. It doesn't always only take 2 or 3 days. Sometimes it takes a week to get the piece printed that you want. But the other thing I will say is Thingiverse has a lot of free designs on their site, And a lot of people design on Etsy too. So for a couple bucks or maybe 10, you might be able to get a really cool print that you couldn't have gotten for free. So you still get to, support that Etsy community. You have to support your Etsy community.
And then even jumping off further off of this, obviously, let's talk about the red hair Black Widow, because that one has the gold
Yes.
widow bites on it. It's also got what I feel to be a more traditional version of it. Obviously, this is kind of what I think people, when they think of, Black Widow, they think of this character in particular, very much comics. I mean, I think of very much J. Scott Campbell's cover that came out maybe 2 years ago, sort of in association with the movie. And that's kind of what this one deals with. And then there's a really cool photo to talk about with this too, with Cap.
Yeah. So you're talking about the gray, right? The gray.
Yeah, I'm talking about the gray and with red hair.
Yeah. That was a 3-day cosplay. I believe I showed up to Randall's Island for a Marvel vs. DC shoot, just smelling like spray paint, because it was just on my deck drying that morning. That was originally the bodysuit that goes under the green vest, Blonde Widow. And I believe I ordered a Voromir from this company who just didn't get it right. Sent it to me twice, still didn't get it right. So the only thing I had left to do was to turn one widow into another widow. So we got on the 3D printer. We printed out the widow bites. It was a lot of foam too. The belt turned out to be foam because that's all I had at the time. This thing can only print one thing at a time. That's why we got 2 3D printers. And yeah, it was basically a matter of taking, I think, Voromir accessories, Infinity War jumpsuit, and then I think I cut a wig for that. Which I really try not to do anymore. I'm not a great wig cutter or stylist. That's why your stylist Naisha is the best at wigs. She does.
So let's even talk about that, because wigs are a whole different ballgame as well. Much like props, there's a reason why people, certain people understand how to do wigs. Again, I am not a cosplayer. I just hear horror stories, and can be very, very bad. It could be very, very complicated. Taking care of your wigs is complicated. Getting a wig, dyeing a wig, washing a wig, styling a wig, and there's reasons why. And wigs, if you don't want to do that, you're going to spend money. It's just the way it is. It's either you're going to do it yourself and you're going to have to learn really quickly how to do it right, or you're going to pay for it. And sometimes paying $300, $400 for one might be the cheapest position overall.
Well, yes, if you can find a wig that is already styled the way that you need it, which I don't think I've ever really done. I've never really found that. The part's always on the wrong side, or the hair's just a little long or a little short. So there's always some modification that I feel needs to be done just to get it right. But again, that's why people like your stylist Naisha exist, because she will come over, handle your wigs, pet your dogs, make you feel calm, and get it right. She did both of my Starlight wigs.
And that's a great segue, because let's talk about Starlight. So obviously The Boys is, I don't know if you've read the comic, but the comic is phenomenal.
I've read parts, yeah.
And I enjoyed it. And I was a big fan of that stuff because I'm a super comic book nerd. I also tend to make money with comic books. And so I love the entire comic book. I enjoy what they did with Amazon. I also happen to like one of the characters in that show because he plays Bola Lind from Avatar: The Last Airbender, Korra stuff, cool fact, super interesting. Didn't know until after the fact that I watched both seasons out there, that they're out there with The Boys. And so, yeah, so how did this entire thing come about? Because you mentioned it briefly, but how did this happen?
Yeah, so my husband and I started watching The Boys together. We thought it was an amazing concept, Justice League, gone wrong, kind of egotistical, just awful people. And watching Annie January kind of join, be introduced to them as we were being introduced to them. It was and what happened to her was just a story that I thought it was the right time to tell. I mentioned, the responsibility with Starlight's story that the show really took, despite what happens to her in the comics. I thought that was really smart. I thought the female fan base was really ready to see this story. But her past of being a pageant girl, the tulle skirt, the dress, was not something that I thought I was going to enjoy dressing up as. In fact, when I was asked, hey, do you want this costume? I'm going to buy a Homelander. I think I said no, but I got one anyway. And it turned into a kind of a happy accident, because as soon as I put it on, I was like, I get this, I was cheese smiling in all of my pictures, feeling like a pageant girl, just like just around the wrong people, and we had a lot of fun shooting some comic inspired pictures at Comic-Con that year.
Yeah, and what is that entire experience like? Because obviously this is a popular show, and I don't know how many people were also cosplaying characters from The Boys, but even the fact that it's popular and that people were very stoked for it, and what was going on with all that, and coming out of it and being like, boom, and then everybody sort of, I would imagine, was flocking to you to some degree.
Not really. I don't think I wouldn't use those words.
People were excited. Let's go with that.
Well, yeah, there were. I think I remember two Starlights specifically on the same day that I did Starlight, and I think I remember a couple on a day that I wasn't. I saw a couple A-Trains, but we actually didn't think that we would see a lot of people cosplaying The Boys, because it had just come out and it was Amazon Prime. I didn't think everyone had that. So I thought it was gonna be a quiet day, that we were gonna go mostly unnoticed, but I was walking around with the only Homelander. So I found my way into a lot of photos.
It's kind of funny. That's how it should be, though. That's how it should be. So, and obviously that has now expanded massively, and it's always easier to sort of look, I guess, backwards. But obviously, The Boys, from that point on, as you stated, just sort of came out when you cosplayed it, and now it's sort of a stable. It's a very popular show, and well, everything winds up on Instagram. And so, what has that been like? Because that's a whole different version inside of cosplay, where Instagram, you can post something up on Instagram and it can get a lot of attention, and people can like it and they comment. And I know your Instagram is a little bit busy, and it's been, what I've seen, very well received on Instagram.
I think anyone who's ever cosplayed someone from The Boys and tagged Tony Starr in it knows that he's a huge supporter of the Boys cosplayers. So it's really exciting when something like that happens. You send out a post or a story, and then all of a sudden an actor from the show likes it. That's pretty exciting. Yeah.
And also, it gets attention, and it sort of becomes a funnel in many ways to your other work and everything else you've cosplayed. And so it just gets attention, and people might come and see Starlight, and then they see everything else that you've done, which is how stuff works. It happens with me all the time with what I do with certain people, and it's always nice when that happens. But what I really want to talk about, and we're going to segue right into DC, because I'm a DC guy. I love DC. I have some amazing interviews with some of the best out of DC. A bunch of comic writers like Paul Levitz, Denny O'Neil, rest in peace, Chuck Dixon, and a few others from DC, and like the old school 90s, 80s, 70s DC. And obviously I want to talk about Green Arrow. I'm also a Cody Rhodes fan. Full disclosure, I enjoy Cody Rhodes. I think the funniest thing is Cody Rhodes versus Steven Seagal, or Steven, who plays Arrow? I'm missing his name.
Stephen Amell.
Yep. If you've ever seen Stardust at a con at San Diego Comic-Con invading Stephen Amell's panel, it's one of the funniest things you will ever see. And obviously, you play, and I'm probably gonna get the name wrong because I'm really bad at this. Arsenal.
Arsenal.
Arsenal. Wow, I'm
Arsenal.
really
Yeah,
bad today.
Roy Harper's character. Yeah, that was that was my first gender bend.
So what prompted you to want to do this character versus other characters in the Green Arrow universe and even the underlying characters that they're based off from DC?
So this was actually inspired by a archery event that we threw at Gotham Archery. Cosplayers and photographers were there. We were throwing knives, throwing axes, shooting bows and arrows, and hanging out with each other, and then shooting some amazing photos. And the costume actually came from one of our students who originally bought the costume and dressed up like Arsenal, but he had grown out of it, so it was kind of a hand-me-down from one of our students. So I didn't make any of that actually. He made all of the knives, and I believe I even used his bow, his actual bow.
So what is that like? Because this is where this gets sort of complicated to some degree. Is that this is also another side of cosplay where there is photography in cosplay, and there's cosplays at cons. And unfortunately, we live in a world where you can't bring certain things into cons anymore.
Yeah.
I highly doubt that.
That's also a good thing. You don't want someone shooting bows and arrows inside Javits Center, right?
I mean, I've been up at Anime Boston, and they have metal detectors for a reason. And the story is that there was a big Pokemon tournament, and apparently these two groups got into a scuffle, and this other group pretty much almost brought guns into a Pokemon tournament because of a fight. It's a crazy story, and there's a reason why they have metal detectors in the Heinz Center. And I've been to a bunch of other events that have nothing to do with anime or comics, and there's metal detectors for a reason, which makes sense. You don't want, and also speaking about 3D printing, I can print a pretty realistic looking gun on a 3D printer. I could print and
on my wall. I don't know if you can see all the guns and the blasters up there, but yeah, they look realistic. They should stay at home. You should spray your tips with red and orange. Don't leave the house with them.
And so obviously when you're shooting, you want a realistic looking bow that may or may not be able to shoot, but looks like it's Arsenal's weapon.
Yes.
And so what is that like for you? That because I think you have worn Arsenal at a con or two.
Yep.
But I don't think that you've brought the knives, and it takes something away, but also there has to be some compromise. The
knives were taken care of with, I believe, paint stirrers and silver paint, and just getting that shaved down right. Again, Matthew DiMartino, our student, is the one that did that. And I did bring a real bow. It's not the part that they're scared about. What they're scared about is the arrow. So the string on the bow gets taken off. And if it's a compound bow, which has those wheels you might have seen on Arrow on the sides.
It's what Robin uses in Zenoscope.
Robin
Hood from Zenoscope. She uses a wheel shooter bow. It's awesome.
So those can actually get locked with like zip ties, or I think it's just zip ties, but they can get locked so that you can't actually pull back on anything. They really appreciate it when your arrows can't even come out either. If you just have like one without a tip that can kind of come out for photos, they usually don't mind that. But yeah, I wouldn't be able to.
How do you figure out what cons appreciate, what cons don't appreciate? Because every con has a bunch of different rules. And I've heard stories where legitly, and I've joked with people about this, where you can't have a prop that's bigger than you. And I said to somebody in this circumstance, I said, you should find a tall person to make them your prop. Yeah. Just to be that person. And it'll be hysterical because who says you can't cosplay as a prop? It's a funny joke, but stepping aside from the joke, certain cons might be more relaxed in certain things. Yeah. For instance, if you're going to, a Star Wars convention, you're going to need stormtroopers with guns, versus a different type of con where Anime Boston is a good example of this, where there was an incident in that convention, so they're going to be a lot stricter. And so how do you figure out what you sort of, I don't want to say get away with, but what is acceptable and what is okay for the con so they don't freak out?
Right. I believe the first time we tried to bring weapons into a con. That sounds wrong. That doesn't sound right. But
it doesn't sound good. It really doesn't.
But I believe we had heard in advance. I'm not sure if we called the Javits Center or if we found out from people at the archery range. But at the archery range, they actually locked it up like real tight. They put like orange clips on it and everything. So by the time we got there, it was very obvious you could not use this if you wanted to. And yeah, I don't remember another discussion with security
because
about it.
You're not going to bring your 3D printed gun to that looks like a gun and it looks like something that a mercenary would use per se.
Yeah, I'm not sure about plastic guns that don't have like the orange in the front, or because I know that people repaint Nerf guns, for instance, and you're allowed to bring those in. But yeah, if anyone is planning on bringing anything that looks like a weapon to a con, get on that website, make sure they're not going to confiscate it from you. If they do, you'll see it again at the end of the day, maybe.
Yeah. It's so bad. If your thing gets confiscated, it's so bad.
Yeah, and keep in mind how much time and passion went into that one accessory, that one weapon. To get it taken away from you would be heartbreaking. That would ruin my entire day. So yeah, there's no harm in calling, because I believe one con we did go to where one of the strings was left on and no one had said anything, and I noticed later that no one had said anything. So yeah, cons treat it different.
And also, it's very much up to discretion in many ways with conventions, where I've seen things that probably shouldn't have gotten into it, and then I've seen the exact thing on the other side, where things that were pretty safe weren't allowed in, or were taken or were tagged very extensively. So I've seen both stuff, and it's very much at the discretion. It's also sometimes, it depends who's checking your stuff. It also depends that your attitude towards them. It is a very subjective thing. And so obviously that's something out there. But sticking with Arrow here, I'm going to sort of jump to a cousin of it. I'm a big Teen Titans fan. I do have a DC Presents number 26 and a high grade book. I paid good for it. It's a fantastic book. I love the Teen Titans. I think they are the best team out there on a personal level. Titans West is not a good book at all. I'm just going to let everybody know that. Okay. But I digress. And I think, obviously, I enjoyed the Ravengers too. It's up on my Instagram, and I love the Ravengers. So you did Rose Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And you did two versions of her. So you've done more of the traditional version of her, where she is, I guess, sort of working with Deathstroke, against Deathstroke, rebelling against her father, and that entire story arc with like the bodysuit and the mask, and obviously the eye missing. And so let's talk about that traditional version first, because it is connected to Arrow in some way.
Yeah, I believe Ravager and Arrow had dated briefly in the comics. So when my first con, my date was the Green Arrow. I was the Huntress. My second con, I converted a lot of the Huntress into a Ravager, kind of to be his date again, for the day that he was Arrow again. So Ravager started out as Huntress, and then it turned into a Ravager. Basically for that reason, so that I look appropriate walking around with an arrow. So that was like a con specific cosplay. And it was built with elements that I had used for other cosplays. There was the black suit I actually used for my original Black Widow. Anyone who's cosplayed as Daenerys recognizes that wig. And yeah, all the biker gear was used from my Ravager costume.
And to even go further into this, because obviously that's a traditional version of Ravager, and then you went and I guess you built a whole new version where it's more of a ballerina, nutcracker, Christmas,
Yes.
sugar plum fairy, if you will. And this is something that I don't want to say it's more delicate, but it's definitely more in the mashup category versus a traditional category. So, what prompted this before we even get into the build on it? Because this is something that's out of the box.
Yeah, this is actually a perfect example of where your cosplay community gives you an idea. This idea was actually Annie Lee Cosplay's idea. Um, we had a holiday shoot planned, and she mentioned that she was going to go with a Nutcracker Starfire, like Sugar Plum Starfire. And I loved the idea so much that I wanted to do my own kind of Sugar Plum Titan, if you will. And I also on that day did, because sometimes I can't decide if I'm going to rep Marvel or DC. I also did a ballerina dagger with a little cloak Nutcracker. It was kind of it was a creepy doll. I don't know if we've got close-ups on that one or pictures, but yeah, she came up with the mashing of the Teen Titans and the Nutcracker, and I ran with it because I thought it was a beautiful, brilliant idea, just like she's a beautiful, brilliant person.
And so, even coming up with that idea, and then obviously it's very much a leotard. You got the ballerina tutu in there.
Yep.
Obviously, I'm not too sure if there was an eye patch in there or not. And obviously, we have sort of that delicate touch. So, what was the build like on that? Obviously, her armor is sort of holding up, I guess, the straps a little bit, and might be sort of cascading your shoulders. If I think I'm describing this right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, what was that entire thing like in building that out and getting all the components? Because this is definitely, you want to hit that Nutcracker vibe, but you still also want to make sure it looks like the character and
Mhm.
people, say, oh, I get it. It's Ravager, it's Rose Wilson, but it's done in also you want to hit that Nutcracker vibe and figuring out those two components.
Yeah. So it again, when I start thinking about a character that I want to cosplay, I look at every version that's ever existed, and I was able to represent different Ravager costumes in different parts of the costume. So instead of the mask, I went with just the eye patch because I thought it was a more delicate look. And then I wanted to represent that armored look that she has in the newer Teen Titans, and the texture that she has in some of the New Age comics is very it does kind of look like chainmail. So I kind of wanted to represent it with the fishnets, and then I all I had to do was dye a pancake tutu orange, and then decide, was I going to go with the blue leotard or the black leotard? Was I going to cut them in half and make it a half blue, half black leotard? Yeah, but I think every single piece of that, I, yeah, it was without Annie Lee's inspiration, I wouldn't have come up with it. I wouldn't have followed through with it, and the concept wouldn't have been as amazing. So I really owe that cosplay to her.
And even to go further, how was this received? Because as I stated, it is outside the box. It is not something that is traditional. It is a mashup, and it is in that category. I don't know how many other people have done something similar to this with Ravager per se, but obviously this is something that is very much, a new concept, and it's a new idea being thrown out.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of mashups or crossovers with Ravager, but the Sugar Plum Titans, there we had a Beast Boy, a Nightwing, and then we had Starfire and Ravager, and I believe we had one more. I'm blanking. I think Zatanna also joined us for that one. But when you think about when holidays come up, now you see a lot more mashups or at least holiday inspired versions of your cosplay. So just by scheduling a photo shoot, kind of hangout style around a holiday will push you to get a little more creative and come up with those like mashups. This was just supposed to be a holiday shoot, where we kind of got a little Christmassy with our costumes. And yeah, because of Annie Lee Cosplay, we walked away with something really special, I think. And as for how was it received, I really liked it, and I received it very well.
And I think people, because I don't think this has been worn at a anime con, or a Comic Con, and typically, unfortunately, anime and Comic Cons don't usually happen in December. I've been to one con that was in December in my entire 15 years of going to anime cons, and it was a blast, and it was a lot of fun. I did 2 Christmas panels, super cool concept with anime, but typically con season is usually sort of, I guess, April to maybe October is sort of the end. And typically November and December, not saying things don't happen, but there's fewer cons in November and December. Except this year, because San Diego is going to happen in November. Thanksgiving weekend, guys. It's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a nightmare. But anyhow, I digress. So obviously, I don't think this has been done at a con yet, but that doesn't mean that in July, Christmas in July, I'm just saying.
Right.
I celebrate Christmas in July. It's a wonderful concept.
That's a really good concept. And this is the kind of community that would just take it and run with it,
Except anime cons don't want to embrace it. I proposed it to them, and there was a con in July, and I'm like, this is it. But I digress here. Totally should do it this summer in July. Just bring it out. Don't even announce.
I'll try to get all the Titans.
Just go as a group to a con in New York and just show up. It'll be perfect. It'll be so perfect on so many levels. So, but I digress right there. And then I want to talk about two more. Lois Lane, Eradicator. I think I got it right this time.
Yes, good job.
And so, what's the story behind this one? Because I believe it's the one behind you.
Yes. So the Tales of the Dark Multiverse have a version of the Death of Superman, number 75. If anyone's a 90s kid out there, you remember when the white plastic bag and the black plastic bag came out and had the poster and the armband, and that's why I started reading Superman comics.
I just opened up a white paper bag of Superman 500. Legitimately, 2 days ago. It's on my Instagram. It's the craziest thing.
Yeah. So it was the first Superman comic that I wanted because I didn't know that this Superman could die. And before he was mortal, he wasn't really that interesting to me. So Superman number 75 is actually what got me into DC comics that were not Batman. Because before that, it was Batman comics. If Catwoman was in it, I read it. That was kind of where my head was. So when Tales of the Dark Multiverse came out, and they did another twist on Death of Superman, where Lois basically blames the Justice League for not being there in time to help Superman defeat Doomsday, and she lets him die, and they let him die. She goes to the Fortress of Solitude with his cape to kind of say goodbye for him to this, this world that was also his, this remnants from Krypton. Anyway, so there she meets the Eradicator, and the Eradicator's like, oh no, I failed. I'm supposed to like make sure these people live, and Kal-El lives, and he's dead, and I failed, and I can't bring him back. But I'm gonna like disappear if I don't have a body or a host. So Lois says, use me, and she has the power to harness the Eradicator. And she basically takes like one good, inhale of his powers and goes, oh, no, 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 no. So she may or may not kill everyone in the Justice League. She may or may not kill Lex Luthor and Joker, things that needed to be done. And I don't want to give the ending away because it's a little heartbreaking. It's a short issue. I highly recommend reading it. It's amazing because it's this new take on this classic character that always does one thing. She's a journalist. We know her. She's a human. She's the LL that we can relate to, that we root for, and not so much in this issue. So it's one of my favorite issues. And the costume is so bold. It's got that bleeding S that like really opened me up to different comics. So it's not just a symbol of hope. It was like, I got to get in on this new version of Lois. And I hear Lois is the key. I don't know what that means, but she's the key.
And to even go further, because obviously this is a step off the beaten path. I love reading things in DC Comics off the beaten path. I love Earth 2. Obviously, The Ravengers, done by Howard Mackin and taken over by a few other people for 12 issues, was fascinating. I enjoyed Batman Incorporated. I enjoyed Superman, Wonder Woman to some degree. And there's a bunch of other stuff that was just outside. Team 7 is a really good series. It's probably better than Suicide Squad in so many ways. And it's actually significant to the DC universe, which is great. Only 8 issues, though. Terrible. Should have gone for like 50. It would have been great. I already know how to write Team 7. If I ever get a job at DC, first project, 50 issues deep. I'm going to Denny O'Neil that shit, but that's not the point. But what was that like to go and do a cosplay that people might recognize relating to Superman? I obviously thought it was a Superman gender bend type thing. And so obviously it's very different. And I'm a DC guy, but that was kind of my first reaction, So what is that like to be like, oh, okay, I'm doing something that people recognize, but they don't know the full history of it?
Yeah. When I first cosplayed her and I first posted her, if you read it, you knew that it was Lois Lane's Eradicator, but you might not really know what that means. Since the Snyder Cut was released, a lot more attention is being paid to this costume, this cosplay, and I don't really know why, because the people who are responding to it have obviously read the comic, but I think it's just it's just that it's trending.
I could take a shot at it. What's going on now because of the Snyder Cut is that there's a lot more opening up of the DC universe, and there's a lot more rabbit holes to jump into now. Versus prior to Justice League, which was a complete failure in many ways. Halfway through the Snyder Cut. So obviously I'm on episode 3/4 technically. Obviously it opens up a bigger DC universe and a bigger DC cinematic universe. And obviously I know a lot of intricate stuff. Read DC, read a bunch of stuff, read all Blackest Night, and read all Flashpoint and all that stuff. So obviously that, but I don't know everything, but I think what's happened is that now there's just a lot more interest in saying, okay, where can we go with this stuff? And also the Joker movie also opened up a variety of things as well, because it's now we're diving into what is known as DC Black, which is DC's Black label. And so that's kind of the Snyder Cut, and AT&T is retarded, for lack of a better word, because they should be going down the Snyder Cut and not the reboot cut. But I digress.
I have to agree with you. I grew up with very close girlfriends, and they never spoke comics with me before. suddenly they watch the Snyder Cut and they're like, yo, did you see the Justice League? And I'm like, what's happening right now? You don't know what the Justice League is. So honestly, Warner Brothers, if you're looking for a greater fan base, there isn't one. Like I was not excited to see it because I heard such awful things about the first one, and I saw it and I love it. I'm a fan they shouldn't have. And I mean, I'm telling you, like, girls that don't read comics, aren't into the nerddom that I'm into, are blown away by it. They enjoyed The Flash. They enjoyed Cyborg. They enjoyed Wonder Woman and watching all those amazing Amazons.
I'm not going to lie. All of us nerds who've been collecting comics are now starting to become very, very rich for the last 20 years. So that's it, because now we are all cashing in. And I am one of those people, undeniably. As I stated, I make money with comics. So anyhow, I digress, because what's also going on, and it's rumored / in production / there's stuff spinning around with it, is Black Canary is sort of going to HBO as well to some degree.
Cool.
Sort of. It's rumored and it's being tweeted out, and there's things that might happen. Birds of Prey might get somewhere involved in all that. Obviously, HBO Max is pushing a lot of different stuff right now in the comics. It's pretty evident that something with her is going to be on HBO at some point in probably the next 2 to 5 years. It's just the rumors. It's the dirt sheet. I have no official confirmation on that. But you've done a version of Black Canary. And so what prompted this one? Because Black Canary is fascinating. It's got connection to Arrow, obviously Oliver Queen and Black Canary date, and obviously Justice League Unlimited. They have a relationship in that series, and they have a relationship in the comics, and then they have a disrelationship, and they got a bunch of other problems going on. So a lot of fun stuff with Black Canary.
Yeah. The Black Canary costume was inspired by the vintage look, the classic look. But I didn't go with the blonde hair for the pictures, because I wanted to, I like the idea of the canary being a bird, and some of the and the flapper style. I wanted to kind of mix the flapper girl with the Black Canary, and that was a time where women were kind of chopping their hair off and starting to stand up a little taller, let's say. So I wanted to kind of represent that. I went a little bit 1920s with the makeup, and then I stuck to a really classic look, which is actually mirrored in Hush, which is one of my all-time favorite comics, where she's standing right there next to the Arrow, and she's got her blonde hair, but she's got that tiny jacket, and she's got not the big pirate boots, but the little pirate boots, the fishnets, the classic fishnets, and the choker. So yeah, all of the versions turned into that version with a little bit of a flapper feel to it. The project that we are going to be showing in just a little while does have that classic Black Canary hair.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a second, but I do want to talk about a lot of the photos that you've taken with this, because there is a lot of cool stuff that's happened with the photos. There's a lot of fun stuff that sort of captures this, gives it very much a DC feel. You know, when we were speaking at the Snyder Cut, you know, and I think this is very similar, where Zack Snyder very much directs his movies like a graphic novel. You could say that you love Batman vs. Superman or hate it, but you have to say that thing looks like a graphic novel. You know, Marvel looks like it took place in New York City today.
Right.
You know?
I actually think that Watchmen, Zack Snyder's Watchmen, is the perfect example of how he directs a movie like a comic book. It literally looked like every frame from Watchmen was on the screen in front of me.
There's a few other things that do that very well. Happy is directed in that style, and Polar on Netflix is directed in what is known as graphic novel format. And so the Snyder Cut is very much graphic novel format. It is not, Fast and Furious style shotting,
Right.
and there's nothing wrong with that. And so a lot of the photos you've taken with Black Canary are very much graphic novel photos versus doing just a cosplay. So what was that like, and what was it like? And I don't know who your photographer is exactly, and this is a good time to shout out your photographer. But even just the choice to do it in those backgrounds and the graphic novel style, I think adds something, because when I'm scrolling through on Instagram, there's a million photos for me to look at. There's an infinite amount of Black Canaries out there. And what's going to make me stop is, okay, the cosplay is good, but it's also the setting and the poses and all that stuff. And I think it's super important to recognize that settings do help.
Yeah, I think a skyline and a dark sunset. The sunset was really on our side that day. It was kind of orangey, and like it did look like a Gotham sunset that you might see. The photographer was my husband, Ready Season 1, and the roof was our own. But the references did come from the pages of comic books, because that's the canary that I really wanted to embody. And yeah, I'll always have a reference from a comic. As you might see, every now and then I'll do a side by side so you can see which references I used.
Yeah, no, and as I stated, it definitely makes a difference, because it's going to make me stop. One of the things is that you need a reason to stop now for something. I go on Instagram and I type in any character, and you could type in Black Canary right now for everybody on Instagram, and a million things are going to come up, from concept art to commissions to cosplay to just comic books, to people who played Black Canary and everything in between, things that are unrelated to Black Canary, or you might find an actual Black Canary flying. So legitly, and so what's going to make me stop and say, oh man, this is a really cool shot, is something that's different and that has that vibe, and I say, oh, this is straight out of a graphic novel. And or it's got that vibe, or it's got that, oh, this is really resonates. You see Black Canary in the middle of sunlight smiling and not looking like Black Canary, I'll stop for a second, but I'm not going to continuously stop. So I think it's a really nice touch, that photo in particular.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, so now let's talk about this project, because this project is what's going on. And so before we play it, what is this project?
So this is a cosplay music video. I am singing on the track. This is not something I normally do in front of people. But like I said, cosplay pushes you to be more creative in ways and areas that you did not think originally it would take you to. But it's taken us here. The videographer, the director is Drew Gilbert. He was amazing. All I had to do was stand there, and he did the rest of it. And the makeup and the logo for a cosplay music video that you're about to see was done by Aubrey Stalker Marino. And the green arrow that you see is going to be played by my husband at Ready Season 1. The video was inspired by the saddest episode of Arrow, Season 4, where we lose Laurel Lance, where the Black Canary passes away. And she shares this line with the green arrow where she says, is actually right after she says goodbye to Felicity. She says, I'm not the love of your life, but you'll always be the love of mine. And the first time that I heard Justin Bieber's song, Anyone, I could not stop thinking of this line. So it was a nagging thought that turned into a music video. So I'm not sure if anyone's done something like this before, if we're allowed to do things like this. But I hope whoever's watching enjoys this, because this is pure cheese by Cosplay Parmesan.
So we're just going to play it, and hopefully we won't get a copy violation. And we're going to see what happens, and hopefully it works.
Awesome.
Dance with me under the diamonds. See me like breath in the cold. Sleep with me here in the silence. Promise me silver and gold. You say that I won't lose you, but you can't predict the future. So just hold on like you will never let go. And if you ever move on without me, I need to make sure you know that you are the only one I'll ever love. Gotta tell you, yeah, you. If it's not you, it's not anyone. Looking back on my life, you're the only good I've ever done. Yeah, you. If it's not you, it's not anyone. Not anyone. It's not anyone.
So to even talk about that, so what was that entire concept like? That building that out and figuring all of that out and even doing
Shop
that.
affordable glasses online at RX for Less USA. We offer all frames with premium lenses for only $39.95.
There we go.
It always starts with that nagging thought. The illustrations came out just so I could kind of block and share with Drew my vision for all of this, which seemed like scattered ideas. And it wasn't until he showed me the rough cut where I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. Because again, I had never really seen anyone do this. I didn't know if it would be, received well. So yeah, we'll see. I'm kind of excited to see what people might say about it.
And so even where did you even shoot this, and what was that entire thing like? Because obviously there's a lot of different stuff going on in this entire shoot.
Yeah, most of it was, part of it was on the roof, the same location that we shot those other canary photos in. I thought it'd be nice to replicate the background. And then there are several empty streets in Red Hook, Brooklyn, which is not too far from us. And there's a tiny little beach called Valentino Park. And I thought it'd be really cute if we had like a little beach scene between Black Canary and Arrow. Because Justin Bieber has a cute little beach scene with his love in his music video for anyone. By the way, thank you, Justin Bieber. This was awesome. I'm sure you're watching.
I'll be tweeting this at Justin Bieber for you. I definitely want to drive in his Ferrari, or drive his Ferrari for that matter.
There's also a pretty famous choreographer on YouTube that I stole a couple moves from. Matt Stefanina. I got a little fussy with it because the leotard and the fishnets called for it, but all those moves are his.
And I just froze. Oh, we're back. That's good. Whew. It would not be an interview without a technical problem. So we have one of those, which means this is official now. So, and obviously I've seen a bunch of trailers. Obviously, my friend DJ Croft, who was on earlier this week, he released his trailer for his 50-second movie for his thing with Laura Croft that he's doing. And so obviously a lot of people are doing a lot of cool fan stuff as of lately. And I've had people do indie comic fan stuff. And obviously I think this is awesome because right now in society, we're all becoming content producers. Mm-hmm. And we're all competing with content and things of that nature. And so I think it's great to do stuff like this. I also think it makes cosplay come alive because while photos are great and I love a bunch of the work you've done and on Instagram, there's also this idea where now we're actually seeing movement and we're actually seeing things occur and we're actually seeing these characters interacting with one another and we're adding music and other things to it as well. And that's a big thing that's going on in comics. So what is that like for you to add another dimension to it and
That's
things that affect the brain more? Because a photo does X when you add music and motion and actual, I don't want to say effort because that's not the right word, but choreography and things of that nature. It changes the way you perceive those characters, and it will change the way those photos are perceived.
Yeah. And it's really my honor if I've pushed or inspired this community in any way, shape, or form. I'd love to give you guys back what they've all given me. I think because it hasn't been received yet. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I just can't say enough how much Drew impressed me, Drew Gilbert, the person who filmed this, and how much none of this would have happened without Aubrey or Pat. Yeah.
So apparently, I think everybody wants me to replay it. So I will replay it for everybody.
Cool.
Give me a second to actually pull it up again and make sure I can find it. And obviously, it's very, very cool, this entire thing. So
I really can't wait to see what everyone else does after they see this. You know what I mean? Because there's always a beginning of something, and then I can't wait to see what the artists in this community do with this kind of idea next.
So hopefully, this is slowly loading. It's not my forte. It's being quite difficult since it's loading. This might do it.
Dance with me under the diamond.
I won't get a copyright violation.
Like breath in the cold.
I don't think so.
Here in the silence. Come kiss me silver and gold. You say that I won't lose you, but you can't predict the future. So just hold on like you'll never let go. And if you ever move on without me, I need to make sure you know that you are the only one I've ever loved. Gotta tell you, yeah, you. If it's not you, it's not anyone. Looking back on my life, you're the only good I've ever done. Yeah, you. If it's not you, it's not anyone. Not anyone. Not anyone.
So obviously, that's the replay in case anybody missed it for you. And even going further onto this, I mean, given that, because I believe this is either the first time or it just came out, right? This entire video and.
Yes, I'll be posting it later, but you saw it here first.
So yeah, so obviously this is new and this is brand new and it's very, very exciting. And depending on how it's received, I mean, are you going to be doing more of this? Because as I stated, everybody's becoming a content producer. And I feel at this stage now, where we are due to COVID and a variety of other things, that you need to be doing things like this in whatever sector you're in. You know, for me, I'm an interviewer and that's where I'm at. And that's why I'm doing 4 to 5 interviews a week now.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, cosplayers need to produce a variety of other stuff. I've seen a bunch of people do stuff making fun of the Suez Canal incident, which is hysterically funny, and things like that. But even going further, things like this as well, where it's well produced and it's well developed, and there's actually effort put into it, and that there's some thought and there's a story being told. Because that's kind of where we're going with COVID. For those that are unaware, that you now need to be really good at telling stories, and throughout this entire video, we have a story being told.
Yeah, I wonder if without a year like we've all spent, if this would have been something I created at this moment. But when you've got the right people around you and you say, hey, I have this really crazy idea, you can get it done. I think I agree. I think it's incredibly produced. Drew Gilbert's amazing. Max Niesman is amazing. He engineered all the audio. And yeah, I can't wait for the next one either. I've already got the next song and the next concept and the next cosplay picked out. And I can't wait. This is, I really hope that it's received well. I hope the cosplay community likes it, just so they can be inspired by it and let them produce whatever it causes. But for me, I'm gonna do it because I have to do it. Even if I had 0 followers, I would be making these cosplays and I would be making these music videos. And now that I have this program to record my voice and these amazing videographers in this community, why not? Let's do it. Let's push it.
Yeah, no, I would ask you what's next, but I do want to leave that as a surprise. The art of the surprise is a nice thing, and the unexpected is nice too sometimes. So I'm not going to push too hard on that point. I don't know anybody else in the comment section wants me to spoil anything too much right now. So I'm going to leave that alone for the time being. But I am curious because we did mention this year, and obviously COVID has done a lot of damage, obviously across the entire sector. I'm a big wrestling fan. WrestleMania is tomorrow night, in case anybody is unaware. If you look at my Twitter, which is on this screen, there's legitimately like 800 wrestling tweets in the last 36 hours because of WrestleMania stuff going on. And obviously that is significantly different. San Diego Comic-Con 2 years in a row is not happening in July. New York Comic-Con, I would put money that it's going to be a very different New York Comic-Con come October, if it happens at all. I hate to say it, but I don't think things are going to be going back to the same. And obviously cosplay, pop culture as a whole, this entire project that I've started legitimately came out of COVID. Last year I did 90 interviews. This year I'm doing 150. So how do you feel everything has changed, and how have you been impacted, and where do you even think cosplay is going? Because I think it has to evolve at this point.
Yeah, I think we've been evolving with the times. Smaller shoots, more distance between the camera. You can't see anyone past here all day. But yeah, you know what? Hopefully it does push us to be more creative on our own, because I think that's healthy. That's great. That betters us. But the blow that a lot of cosplayers have taken, who, for instance, live alone this year or have health concerns that make even small shoots risky, I think it was hard. But if you've been involved with some of the chats I've been involved with, they're there for each other, and they're taking care of each other, just like they should be. Yeah, I think COVID, not only this year, bringing people together, but Black Lives Matters protests, even if you couldn't be there in person, your presence was known on Instagram, and I think it's still, we're still able to be there for each other, but the loss and the stress this past year, it's gonna take a while to get over and to grieve. But I think it's also going to produce art because we're all feeling.
And even to go further, because obviously I view the con very differently because I'm a panelist, and I just submit through their application, and I'm not like a guest panelist or anything like that. But I view my interaction as very different because I'm sitting up top and then I'm lecturing essentially, and then we have Q&As, and I love it because I bring my knowledge on anime and comic books and comic book investing and a variety of other stuff. But with cosplayers, people like taking photos of cosplayers or with them or talking with them.
Right.
And obviously, it's a little bit more, I guess, intimate is a word. I think it's the best word to describe it, where, if you're taking a photo of somebody, you have to be somewhat close to them. And obviously with COVID, that's an issue. And then even wearing masks, and that might be something. And me and a bunch of other cosplayers were speaking about this, and some of them are like, I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know how we're going to have cosplay at cons again. I don't know if it's going to be the type of thing where everything's fine, but you have to wear a mask, or is it going to be a smaller type of thing, or is it just going to be no photos? And so I'm curious what your take is on that, if you even have an idea, because it is such a new concept with that. And I think it's going to be a lot of experimentation on how that has to be rolled out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of trust and positivity in the cosplay community. I think that we will have cons again, and I don't know what has to happen specifically, but I know that it will happen. This is a determined, creative community. Maybe it happens in Central Park instead of Javits from now on. Maybe it's, outdoors in the park. Maybe the entire New York streets turns into Comic-Con for a weekend. That would be awesome. I think
I know what's going on. I have a bunch of comic creator friends who are down in Florida and South Carolina, and what they basically said is that no cosplay is occurring, but cons are opening and comic stuff's happening and some celebrities are around, but the cosplay element of it is just not there yet, because everybody's wearing a mask, everybody's being responsible, and everybody, is starting to slowly go in. And we're talking maybe 1,000 people at a con. We're not talking about 100,000, which is a big difference as well. When you get 100, 120,000 people, con crud is real. And COVID has only proven that. If you have the flu on Monday and you're at New York Comic Con on Friday and Saturday and Sunday, I'm willing to put money you got the flu at New York Comic Con. I'm just saying that it's a pretty logical position, and with something so infectious that I don't really know, in which I think that it's going to be very much a trial and error. And let's be realistic. California and New York are going to be the last two to come back.
Well, yeah, we're huge cities. So yeah, if we don't get creative fast, it might not happen this October also. And I think the cosplay community, as it was evolving recently, I think a lot more people have been booking shoots, taking pictures that aren't necessarily at Comic-Con. So I think, even though those are the ones that get posted, the really fancy ones, the ones that Grace and Shine make so beautiful, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that's me. Those are the ones that we post, but the ones that we live for are, the kids that come up to you at the con and they're like, hey, I love your.
I would even make the argument that the Instagram is the top 5% of the entire echelon, where the cosplay community is the other 95%. And I think that's something that is different, because there are people who don't care, and they cosplay and they don't care about Instagram. All they want to do is they want to go to their con as their favorite Mortal Kombat character. And they have maybe 2,000 followers on Instagram, but they live for that. And they live for seeing another person just as a Mortal Kombat thing. And I think that's where I view the community. And I'm not a part of that community per se. I just happen to know a lot. And I just think that that's where the community, I think, is hurting the most. I don't think it's so much the Instagram, because people have cosplay families.
Right.
And we're not talking about big Instagrammers. We're talking about people who have like 500 followers, but they all get together at a con and they haven't seen each other for
Right.
6 months. And then you see somebody you don't even know, and it's great to talk to them in chat. But it's super complicated. Like I have a comic panel family to some degree where there's a group of us that we were friends on Facebook and we engage every once in a while on Facebook. But at a con, I come to his panel, he comes to mine, and we talk about things, and we have an exchange of ideas on like deep, like anime, old school stuff, and like data dives. So I just think it's going to be super interesting where all this comes together and how that gets sort of restored. And I think it's going to be stronger after all this. I really do.
I have no doubt. I agree.
And so that's how I view everything. And I just think it's just gonna. I think that it's very much a wait and see type of thing.
Yeah. I have faith in the meantime, because we are this community. So it happens the way that we say it does. We wear masks, we take responsibility, we get vaccinated, and then we get creative.
Yeah, and I also think this summer is going to be very interesting because I think it's going to be very much experiments, and I think it's very, very exciting what's going to come out of this. And I also like this entire concept of virtual cons. I think this what we're doing here, and I think virtual cons and all that stuff. I think that's about to become a hell of a lot bigger.
Yeah, and who knows? I might be able to like walk around and enjoy a con one day if I'm not in a suit in a cosplay that everyone wants to take a picture of, because sometimes it's hard to just get to the bathroom. So sometimes
I know stories about that. Wasabi from Cosplay Legion, I think.
I might.
His story is that what wound up happening is that he was dressed as Scorpio or Sub-Zero, I forgot which, but he couldn't legitly. He was trying to get like a breath of fresh air. And he couldn't get out of the con because every 5 seconds he were trying to take photos, and he was happy to do it, but like he wanted to sort of just like get some air outside for a few minutes or for like 30 minutes, and he had to actually almost like take off his entire cosplay in the middle of New York Comic Con to get out. It's a ridiculously funny story, and when he told it to me, I just started laughing because you know exactly how that works.
Yeah, especially when it's children. You don't want to say no. You want to be that hero that takes the picture with them.
I don't even know if it was just children or just like literally every 5 seconds. And I thought it was hilarious because I could just imagine and see it. But I digress. And on that note, I definitely want to give you an opportunity for self-promotion because obviously we've been speaking. Obviously we showed that music video. So where can people find you on Instagram? I know you don't have a Twitter yet. Do you have a Facebook page? And do you have a TikTok? 'Cause that's the new thing that everybody has.
I don't yet. I only represent my cosplay as Cosplay Parmesan on Instagram. So that's where you're going to have to go to for all of my content. And if that ever changes, I'll learn how to post a story about it.
So where is this video going to be? Because obviously, is it going to just be on Instagram, or where is it going?
It's going to be on Instagram, and then we will have to. I'll let everybody know where Drew's going to have it on, for his self promotion as well.
Well, so obviously follow on Instagram, super important. That's the only place. So if you see Cosplay Parmesan on Twitter, it's not you, or Facebook or YouTube or anything like that, unless it's Drew or somebody else posted the video. And in that case, that video might be elsewhere. That video might wind up on Twitter, but it's not coming directly out of you. So keep that in mind. Obviously, if you want to see it, Instagram. Super important, by the way, and I've been saying this all the time at this point, is that you have to support indie. Typically, supporting indie is in 2 ways. You have to financially support independent creators, cosplayers, everybody who's producing something. And typically, the way you should do it is through money. And so whatever somebody has, whether that's Patreon, buy me a coffee, PayPal link. If you just want to give me your credit card, I'll take what I need. I also take Social Security. I take Bitcoin. I only take whole Bitcoin. So if you really want to be nice to me, You could throw me a $60,000 Bitcoin. I will happily accept it. But anyway, in all seriousness, though, you do need to support people economically, whether that's Prince, Patreon, or anything else. So that's super important. And then secondly, money's tight right now. I completely get it. Let's be realistic and let's be real. COVID has wrecked people financially. It has done a lot of damage to people's savings. Even the best people who have emergency funds and money in the bank have, once them had to dip into it. 80% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck at the moment. So if you have a little bit of money, please take care of yourself. Make sure your rent's paid for. Make sure your mortgage is paid for. Make sure you have food, water, shelter, electricity, internet. Make sure your kids are good. Make sure your wife's good. Your husband's good. Your boyfriend, girlfriend is good. Your significant other. Make sure your dog's fine if you got a dog or a cat. If I didn't say your kids are good, please make sure your kids are good. And also make sure you have money for the next month, because we are far from out of this and there's damage that is still in effect. So if that's the case, you should be following people on social media, supporting, liking Instagrams, obviously, like Cosplayer Parmesan's Instagram, like photos, engage, just shoot somebody a message on Instagram, makes people feel really good.
And it makes you smile. It'll make you happy.
That too. So please go do that. And on that note, I can't encourage anymore, and I'm getting really tired of doing this, guys, and encouraging everybody. So just start doing it. So I have to stop saying it, and I'm going to give you the final word.
Well, I mean, then it goes to thanking the cosplay community for every way that you've helped me grow. Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap.